In 2022, the West African nation of Burkina Faso was thrust into a political whirlwind as Ibrahim Traoré, a young and relatively unknown military officer, assumed control of the country through a military coup. His rise to power marked the beginning of a new chapter in Burkina Faso's tumultuous political history. A chapter filled with hope, but also tension with Western powers, particularly France and the United States. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is one of defiance, resilience, and a vision for a different future for his people. Burkina Faso has a long history of political instability, with multiple coups since its independence from France in 1960. By 2022, the country was grappling with an escalating insurgency fueled by extremist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, leading to widespread insecurity and displacement. In January 2022, the military, led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, took power in a coup ousting then-President Rochmark Christian Kabore, who had been criticized for his failure to curb the insurgency. However, the Damiba administration quickly faced challenges, particularly in its inability to stem the growing jihadist threat. Enter Ibrahim Traoré. At just 34 years old, Traoré was a captain in the military and had been serving in the western regions of the country, which were heavily affected by the insurgency. With a growing sense of frustration within the military about the inability to restore order and protect the citizens, Traoré led a second coup in September 2022, overthrowing Damiba. While his military experience was relatively limited, Traoré's leadership abilities and charisma earned him widespread support from the military and a large section of the Burkinabe population. His promise was clear: "We will bring security to Burkina Faso." Once in power, Ibrahim Traoré was quick to present himself as a nationalist and anti-imperialist leader. He took swift action against the corrupt political elites and vowed to eradicate the jihadist insurgency that had plagued the country for nearly a decade. His agenda was centered around sovereignty, self-reliance, and resistance to foreign intervention, particularly from former colonial power France, which has had a long-standing military presence in West Africa. Under Traoré, Burkina Faso withdrew from the Barkhane military operation led by France and has sought to realign its foreign policy to better serve the interests of Burkinabe citizens. Traoré's leadership has been marked by his emphasis on Pan-Africanism and the idea of African countries breaking free from the colonial influence of Western powers. He has actively sought to build stronger ties with countries outside the Western orbit, such as Russia and China, in an effort to counterbalance the influence of France and the United States in the region. Ibrahim Traoré's relationship with Russia has been one of the most significant developments of his time in power. Despite the global tensions surrounding Russia's actions in Ukraine, Burkina Faso has openly engaged with Russia, particularly in the areas of military cooperation and economic partnerships. In 2023, Burkina Faso officially declared its intention to deepen ties with Moscow, including the possibility of receiving military support from Russia to help combat the insurgency. Traoré's government welcomed the presence of Wagner Group, the Russian paramilitary organization, as a potential partner in its fight against extremist groups, in contrast to the French military forces that were seen as ineffective and unwilling to fully commit to the security needs of the country. This move, which many see as part of a broader shift towards multipolarity, was welcomed by certain factions in Burkina Faso, who view it as a rejection of the former colonial powers and a step towards greater autonomy. But this relationship has raised alarm bells in Western capitals, especially Paris and Washington, both of whom view Russia's increasing influence in Africa as a threat to their own strategic interests. The rise of Ibrahim Traoré has been unsettling for Western powers, particularly France and the United States, due to several key factors. Anti-Western sentiment. Traoré's stance on sovereignty and his opposition to French military operations in the region signal a broader rejection of Western influence. This has resonated deeply with many Burkinabe citizens who view France's former colonial role as a continued form of exploitation. Russia's growing influence. The deepening ties between Burkina Faso and Russia, both economically and militarily, are a direct challenge to France's long-standing dominance in West Africa. The Wagner Group's increasing presence in the Sahel, a region of strategic importance to the West, is seen as a blow to France's political and military clout. Destabilizing influence. The West, particularly the United States, has raised concerns that Traoré's government might push Burkina Faso further into instability, especially with its newfound alliances with Russian-backed forces. Challenging the status quo. Traoré is emblematic of a new wave of African leadership that is tired of the neo-colonial practices of Western countries. His strong anti-imperialist rhetoric resonates across the continent, making him a figurehead for other nations seeking to reclaim their sovereignty and chart a path independent of Western pressures. While Traoré's foreign policy is a significant part of his legacy, his domestic achievements cannot be ignored. Since taking power, he has launched a nationwide mobilization to bolster local defense forces, allowing more communities to take up arms in the fight against insurgents. Prioritize self-sufficiency in food production, aiming to reduce Burkina Faso's dependence on foreign aid and imports, particularly from former colonial powers. Initiated reforms to combat corruption and promote transparency in government, building a sense of accountability among the ruling elite. However, Traoré faces significant challenges. The insurgency continues to rage across the country, with extremist groups controlling large swaths of territory. The government must also contend with limited resources, and the country's economic recovery remains fragile. Ibrahim Traoré is at a crossroads. His leadership has drawn both praise and criticism, both domestically and internationally. His ability to secure Burkina Faso's sovereignty, fight back against external pressures, and bring stability to the country will determine the course of his legacy. For now, Traoré has proven to be a man of his word, unafraid to confront the status quo and forge a new path for his country. His vision of a sovereign Africa, free from the control of former colonial powers, resonates with many on the continent. But whether his policies will lead to lasting peace and prosperity in Burkina Faso remains uncertain. Ibrahim Traoré is a leader whose rise to power challenges conventional narratives about Africa's relationship with the West. While Western leaders, particularly in France and the United States, view his alliances with Russia with trepidation, Traoré remains steadfast in his commitment to securing a future for Burkina Faso that is independent, secure, and free from foreign manipulation. The next few years will be crucial in determining whether he will succeed in turning his vision into reality or whether external forces will force him to recalibrate.